Welcome to Face to Face. This is a show about change and what's next. It's a show that asks questions and peels back the layers of our average everyday experience and goes beyond scratching the surface. We interview people doing incredible things who are making a difference around the globe. Join me as we listen in and get one step closer to understanding that big ideas shared create collaboration. Collaboration can inspire community, and communities create social change. I'm David Peck, and this is Face to Face. So my next interview is with Richard Wiseman. What a delight to have Richard on the show. Thank you, Richard, if you're listening. I'm sure you don't have time for it, but you never know. Perhaps you're at another ideas meeting. So much fun, and what a delight again to have you here on Face to Face. We talk about Richard's new book that he co-wrote with David Copperfield called A History of Magic. Some of you know that I've been doing magic for many years and have a deep love for it. And this is a beautiful new book. You need to have a look at it online for sure. Consider getting it as a Christmas gift for someone. It's a smaller coffee table book, but it's stunning. It's gorgeous. It's about magic. It's about mystery. It's about wonder. It's about history. It's about the first smart home that was designed by a guy by the name of Robert Houdin, and some of you may know that name, but check the book out online or where books are sold. It's called David Copperfield's History of Magic. And Richard and I chat about that. We talk about why he was involved, but we also talk about so many other things. And this was just as I said, a real delight for me to have Richard on the show. I hope he'll come back. But we talk about the psychology of magic. We talk about mystery and wonder. We talk about Dale Carnegie and how important How to Win Friends and Influence People was for him. And interestingly, it was a book that I read at quite a young age as well. We talk about why it's quite handy to be likable. We talk about Monty Python and comedy and humor and how you can break down the fourth wall through a sense of humor by going in a different direction, by turning things on their head. We talk about luck and why good ideas are sticky. We talk about the world's funniest joke and why flexibility is so important. We talk about this thing called tunnel vision and how we can get caught in these ruts. And we talk, this was fascinating for me, but we talk about this idea of observation and what so many of us miss along the way. We talk about two kinds of silence. If this doesn't grab you, I'm not sure what will, but bored silence and fascinated silence. I made a comment about ideas meetings, but Richard and I have quite a bit of fun around this, but also we talk about why opening up and why listening at an ideas meeting, at a brainstorming session, where you come together with a group of people to talk about creative projects, why that's so important and why you want to get people to loosen up. Can you get a sense here for some of the places that we went, Richard and I? And like I said, we just had almost too much fun doing this interview. I hope you enjoy it. I hope you look into some of Richard's work. You can find him out online, millions of views online, and many books. 59 Seconds is a book I'm ordering as well today. So check him out online, richardwiseman.com. The book is David Copperfield's History of Magic. And so much more going on than meets the eye, it seems to me. And isn't it wonderful that I think it's wonderful that we are, during this crazy COVID-like era, still able to connect with people in a new way, in a digital way, and yet still have, meaningful contact. And it's just, Richard, I feel like I'm a better person having had this conversation with you today. So thank you for that. richardwiseman.com, David Copperfield's History of Magic. Check it out. And coming right up, stay tuned here on Face to Face. Well, welcome to Face to Face. We are joined by a very special guest here with us today. I can't believe we've got that Richard Wiseman is here today. I'm just going to say it. Richard, thank you for joining us. I mean, how many of my listeners probably already know who you are? That should be the first question. Thanks for joining us today.
I can't put a precise figure on it. It's very difficult. But I know who I am. So that's one. And I listen. You know who I am. That's two. I mean, numbers are already going up. If they carry on like this, we're going to be in the thousands.
Richard,
so, thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, it's so great to have you. And it's far too early in the morning here in Toronto to be dealing with this kind of comedy right out of the gate. This is
you're doing this 8 a.m. apparently your time. That's remarkable.
Second cup of coffee, Richard.
I don't exist. I exist around about 11 a.m. I exist about. See, I'm even now. Like it's 1 o'clock in the afternoon. I can't even say the sentence that I wanted to say. And then you're doing well at 8 a.m.
And
It's halfway
English
through the day
is
here.
your mother tongue. So
Apparently, what I wanted to
yes.
say was I didn't really exist until 11 a.m. But I didn't. Instead, I just sort of came up with a different form of wordage, and it made no sense at all.
Is that so you don't exist in a metaphysical sense, Richard, or
No, in a physical sense,
in
I
a
literally don't exist. I come into being around about 11 a.m. and then
right?
I don't. Unfortunately, I cease being at about 11:30. There's only a 30-minute period, which makes all my achievements even more impressive because I've accomplished them all in only 30 minutes each day.
So tell me, why did you go into psychology? Why didn't you go into comedy? This is
Well, for reasons that are probably becoming apparent to your listeners.
Oh man, this is fantastic. I'm just
I got into magic very young,
yes.
when I was about 8 years old. And the reason I got into psychology was I read a book on magic, but I was probably, I don't know, 15 or something. And it said that in order to be a good magician, it'd be quite handy if you were likable. And one of the best books to read on likability was Dale Carnegie's How to Win Friends and Influence People. So I read
Yep.
that book. I thought that it was a great book. It's a fantastic book. And I thought that's what psychology was. And so I enrolled for a degree in London on psychology and spent 3 years doing that. And that's how I got into psychology. What I didn't realize is that most psychology is really dull and that Carnegie's stuff was really interesting in comparison. So there was a little bit of readjustment to do. But yeah, it's all down to magic and Carnegie.
Yeah, it's interesting you bring that book up. I read that at quite a young age as well. It had a huge impact on me, and I know you've done a lot of work on the self-help movement and whatever that means. But I know you have a lot to say about that. And I mean, wasn't Carnegie one of the forerunners? Would you say
Yeah.
I think of do you remember Robert Fulghum, Everything I Needed to Know I Learned in Kindergarten? That was another one that had an
Oh,
impact.
okay. I don't think we had that over here. But no, so Carnegie was very, very early. And what's interesting, I'm a bit obsessed with Carnegie because he's so good. And I could not work out why that book was such a pleasure to read. And then I chatted to his biographer, and it turns out that he spent about a decade going around North America giving talks. And those chapters are the transcripts of the talks.
Oh, okay.
So he's actually writing to be read. And that's very different. When you start to give talks, you realize that there's a particular way of speaking and you have to use examples all the time and,
Sure.
and remind people what you've just said. It's not the same as the written word. And I think the book is amazing in part because of that. I also found out that he kept a diary. Carnegie kept a diary, but it was a really unusual diary because instead of writing down what positive psychologists would tell you to do today, which is all the things that have gone well, he used to write down what he would call damn stupid things that I've done today and what I intend to do to stop them happening in the future.
Oh, that's fantastic.
It's great. Every night he would go, what was the silly thing I said, the daft decision I made, the thing that I now regret, and what am I going to do tomorrow to stop that happening? So it's a great piece of advice. Really, really good. And all that comes from Carnegie, just that idea which magicians use as well, remembering people's names. That's kind of helpful, not wanting to kick over the beehive if you want to collect the honey, all these sort of wonderful, memorable phrases. They're all in there. It pains me to say it because I didn't write the book and I get no money from this book.
So
sales,
he covered it all.
He covered it pretty much between that and how to stop worrying and start living.
Richard, it's really interesting that what was the phrase? It was written to be read. I mean, often
it would be read out loud in a sense.
To be read out loud, almost like poetry.
Yes, and also, I mean, I have given lots and lots and lots of talks before the pandemic. I was speaking 2 or 3 times a week, and it is a different art form to writing. Because the beats are different, and the sense of drama is different, and it's there's you often have to repeat yourself. So if I'm talking about luck, for example, I might say a lot of people ask me, what do I need to do to be lucky? And it's a great question.
It is.
What changes can you make to your life right now that will increase the luck in your life? That's how you'd say it, but you wouldn't write it like that. And so what was great about Carnegie, he was taking those transcripts, which he knew worked live, and putting them into print.
Yeah, it's so good. What a great piece of advice, and for speakers, for creatives, for artists of any kind, theater,
You know,
anyone on stage, really, right? It's wonderful. I don't. We're well into this conversation on Face to Face, and again, thank you for joining me, and already having so much fun, and I hope our listeners are too. And for those who don't know you, I hope their interest is piqued. There's so much to learn about you, Richard. You know what? Born in Loudon. My father was from Loudon.
oh, really?
Yeah. Yeah. I still have family who live in Loudon. Come on. What's going on with that? I was born on the 16th of September, Richard. You were born on the 17th, I think.
Yes, indeed. So my goodness, there's so many parallels there. So explain to us. Right. I mean, Luton's.
How come it's taken so long for us to meet, Richard?
We're like long lost brothers. It's right. Amazing the bond I feel. Well, that's great. I didn't know. I don't meet many people who've got family in Luton, so we should explain. That's a city just north of London.
That's exactly.
Yeah. That
can be. You know what? How about we decide right now to do a second podcast, and we're just going to talk about the city of Luton.
That would be interesting. Yes, it'd be interesting to us too. I don't know whether it'd be interesting to anyone else.
Hey, Richard, I want to see the data on that podcast, how well that one does.
The good folks of Luton will listen.
That's right. So what are we here? What are we doing here today? I have this profound love.
I've got no idea. Sorry. Right.
I too, like you, have this profound love for magic, and I've been doing it most of my life since a young boy. I read Carnegie as well. There's another connecting point for us. But tell me about this guy, David Copperfield, and this new book called History of Magic. I mean, what a gorgeous piece. I just thankfully got my copy a few days ago, well into it. Stunning book, wonderful history, so rich. Tell me some more about why people need to read this, and maybe even a quick shout out as to where they can get it.
Well, hopefully they can get it in all good bookstores and online and everything. In terms of the genesis, I 3 years ago, I went to a conference in Vegas, and a friend of mine had some tickets to go and see David's show. We go and see the show. It's amazing. David invites us backstage. We have a chat with him, and he says, come and look around this museum, because he has a secret museum of magic in Vegas. And it's colossal. It's like the sort of Smithsonian of magic.
I've heard rumors, Richard.
It's hundreds of thousands of items. It's beautiful.
Wow.
Because of the secrecy, it's not open to the public. He can't do that. And so he gives these private tours, and we go on a private tour. And I thought, wouldn't it be amazing to open that up to the public via a book? And so it's a book that celebrates my love of magic, your love of magic, as well, David's love of magic. And it talks about the objects, in some of the key objects in the museum, what that tells us about magic, psychology, how magic has influenced science and technology, and so on. So the book came out a couple of weeks ago after we've been working on it for 3 years, and Homer did a great job of photos. There's another magician, David Britland, involved in it as well. It's stunning. I mean, it really is stunning. It's a coffee table book. It's about 270 pages, glossy pages. It looks great. And so I say to my mum, I've got this book coming out on history of magic. It's the first one I've written really about history of magic. And she said, oh no, it's your second book on history of magic. And I thought, no, she's wrong. And then she goes into the loft in our house in Luton, comes back, because it turns out that when I was 12 years old, I wrote a school project on the history of magic.
That's awesome.
And this book, which is sitting here right now, is about 40 pages long. And it's got some of the same material which we're covering in the Copperfield book, but it also has a picture of David Copperfield in that school project.
Oh, that's awesome.
And
please tell me you shared that with David, that he has.
He couldn't believe it. Couldn't believe it.
I hope it's one of how many books does he have in his museum? We're talking thousands, right?
Oh, so, tens of thousands, yeah. Tens of thousands.
And
yes.
Did you get a special place on one of those shelves?
Not with that one. That school project's staying here. But
and that's soon to be released by Simon & Schuster as well, isn't it?
That's correct. That's the add-on. That's right. Yes.
Word on the street.
And basically, people have got a year to try and decipher my handwriting and work out what's in there.
That is really, it's so
astonishing.
Cool.
if you'd have told 12-year-old Wiseman that one
Yeah,
day he'll be writing a book with David Copperfield and a big glossy affair, I wouldn't have believed you. I was a kid
sure.
from Luton, and so dreams do happen, and magic is such a fantastic world. Things like that do happen. It's a small world, it's a very interconnected world.
Well,
So yeah, fascinating.
Richard, let's talk about David Copperfield for a second. I mean, again, beautiful book. I've seen him live several times. I look to my left, and there's a framed copy of the Statue of Liberty poster signed to me back in the, I don't know, 80s at what used to be called the O'Keefe Center, when he blew close to 3,000 people's minds on one night when he was in town for a few days. I mean, this is a guy who's still doing, what is it, 300, 400, 500 shows a year?
It's astonishing. I mean, he does 2 shows every single day in Vegas, 3 at the weekends. It's astonishing.
It's astonishing.
Yeah.
And what I was going to say is, when you said dream, about dreams and just this idea of wonder, and there's a beautiful line that David, I'm just trying to think of it. It's early on in the book. He says, this endless appetite for wonder. What was David's first stage name? Davino, wasn't it? At about the age of 9? I mean,
yes.
Here you are writing your book, at 12. Here's David Copperfield before all of this we have before us. And he too is imagining and dreaming, and he steps into this magic store in New York, and everything changes. It's brilliant.
And I think that's one of the amazing things about magic, the mindset it gives you, which is that you routinely think of something impossible and then figure out a way of doing it. That's what magicians do. That's their second nature. And so I think that's kind of an astonishing mindset that whatever you think, okay, so I've got this dream. Well, we all know it's not enough to have the dream. You've got to figure out a way of doing it. And because lots of things they do are impossible, they've got to come up with some pretty lateral solutions.
Right.
And of course, that's true in everyday life. You have this impossible dream. You think, oh, hold on a second. If I see this completely differently, or I do the opposite. My go-to bit of creativity or creative advice is just do the opposite to everyone else. When they're going big, you go small, and vice versa. Just do the opposite. So I did some shows here a few years ago in Edinburgh where everyone, because I'm involved in the Edinburgh Festival, which is this huge arts festival, largest arts festival in the world. Everyone comes through with shows. How do you stand out? And I thought, well, everyone's show has got people on stage. That's the one thing that I will guarantee you. So I will do a show with no one on stage. And that's what we did. We did a show where people came in, they took part in psychology experiments via a huge PowerPoint presentation and props and so on, but there was no one on stage. Now, just that simple thought of doing the opposite to what everyone else had done meant that we sold out and we got a lot of press and so on. So it's always my go-to bit of creative advice.
Yeah, turn things on their head. I mean, isn't that what you're getting at about creating your own luck?
Yeah, it's to some extent. Yeah, I mean, the luck work, which, I mean, all these things come out of odd chance conversations often.
Sure.
So the luck work is now like 20 years old, and it came out of a conversation essentially with a colleague who was talking to people about key events in their lives, and said a lot of them describe themselves as lucky and unlucky. And I thought that's a really interesting concept. And often the best thoughts are there, but they kind of pass us by. And it's a question of stopping, going, hold on a minute, the thing you said there, instead of just going on and doing whatever I was planning to do with my research, hold on a minute, you just said something really interesting. Let's change direction. And that turned into the Luck Project, which was to the lives and minds of about 1,000 exceptionally lucky and unlucky people.
So would you, I mean, again, once if I'm sort of speaking to some of my listeners who may not know who you are. I mean, your background, fascinating, millions of views on YouTube. I want to know what the public understanding of psychology is, by the way. Your width and your breadth and your depth. I mean, it's really remarkable, Richard. Do you also share this endless appetite for wonder? What I guess I'm trying to get at is, are you just a big kid? Maybe is the question, Richard.
I think I am. I mean, that old joke of when I grow up, I want to be a magician, and you can't do both.
Sure.
I think magicians are kids.
That's right.
I think so we should explain to folks, I started life as a magician, then I became a psychologist. I've done quite a lot on YouTube. There's a channel called Quirkology, which has a lot of sort of magical thinking stuff on there. And then I've written books on luck and self-help and so on.
He's understating, folks, just so you know. But yeah, go ahead.
I did a little bit of research along the way. And I think what interests me more than anything else is just smart ways of doing stuff. When I come across things that are different, things that are smart, things that are sticky. And what I mean by sticky is if you've got an idea and you go to a party, mention your idea to people and see whether they ask you questions about it. If they don't, your idea probably doesn't interest them very much. And I think it's a bit like performing magic. You know whether you've got something or not by the whites of their eyes. You're standing in front of people. That's how you know. You don't know. Same as comedy. You don't know whether something's funny or not by telling yourself the joke. You know it when you're standing in front of an audience. That's when you find out. And it's the same with ideas. Good ideas fly. They're sticky. They get into your mind and you can't get rid of them. So, many, many years ago, we were looking for a big national experiment. So my stuff involves the public in this country. And we wanted an experiment that would involve the whole nation, involve families, and so on. And just as I walked into the room to pitch for that funding, I said, okay, what I'm going to do is search the world's funniest joke. Now that is a sticky idea. Once you've heard that idea, love it or hate it, you'll have questions. You'll go, so you did what? Well, what is the world's funniest? Does it even make sense to talk about the world's funniest joke? Sure. And it's a sticky idea. Mention it to people at parties, it'll start conversations. And so that's what we did for a year, and people can read about that on the internet. But it's just an example of the sorts of ideas I love, and magic is full of smart ideas.
Where I'm going, I'm going to just nerd out here a little bit on Monty Python. This is Norman Scribbler. He's about to write the world's most funniest joke, and as a result, die laughing from it.
Not many people would know that. So yeah, absolutely. So that was one of them. Yes, that's one of our inspirations for that.
Richard, Norman Scribbler is hysterical.
It's extremely funny. Now, the other thing about Monty Python is in my head, I'd seen a Python sketch where, as an observer, you didn't notice these incongruous characters in the background.
Sure.
And I'd seen it when I was maybe, I don't know, 15 or something like that. And I couldn't find the sketch. And I was interested in it because I'm interested in observation and what people miss. I happened to bump into Michael Palin at a kind of event we were doing. And I mentioned it to him and he said, I know the sketch. I'll send it over to you. And I remember writing it and we spoke about the background of it. And then I ended up doing an academic paper on that sketch.
Oh, that's awesome.
So it was so basically the sketch is a sort of World War I sketch, and then there's some characters talking, and then the director comes on and says, hold on a second, can we just lose all the characters that aren't involved in this sketch? And you realize there's a Viking there, like an astronaut there, and you just hadn't spotted them. So yeah, the Python actually did inspire some.
Oh, that's awesome.
As well.
Where can you access that essay online?
Yeah, it's Richard Wiseman. Monty Python will probably do it, or research or something like that. Yeah, it's open access, so it's all there.
Well, just so you know, that's the first thing I'll be searching soon as our call is done today. I so want to talk about Monty Python as well. It just cracks me up. The genius of some of their work.
It's really very funny.
Really
it's like a lot of comedy. It's very creative.
You just said something that's fascinating to me, having been a student of wonder, I suppose, for years, as corny as that might sound for some people, but, having studied philosophy, Plato, Descartes, Aristotle, most of the greats talk about philosophy beginning in wonder, and magic, beginning in wonder. And David I think it was page 7 of by the way, David Copperfield's History of Magic. You got to get it. It's a beautiful coffee table book, as Richard says, and it's a fun, interesting, wonderful read. But he talks about this endless appetite for wonder. You just said something. You said observation and what people miss is what fascinates you. Can you talk about that a little bit more? Is that about is that about being present, Richard? Is that about paying attention to, I don't know,
I think it's
being a
more
little
than
more
that.
focused?
I think when it comes to ideas, big ideas for projects, I think what we tend to do is get a bit tunnel visioned, and we go, this is our way forward. This is
Sure.
what we are doing. And at the early stage of any project, I think you have to be prepared to throw all of that out and do something completely different, to use a Python phrase.
And now for something completely different. Yeah.
And it's why, I have a wonderful research team, and sometimes I annoy the heck out of them because I tell them we're going to go in one direction, and then a week in, I go, you know what? We're all heading in a different direction. And I think that requires a certain type of thinking, a certain type of flexibility. I can remember I was going to write a book on happiness very early on in the there's a lot of books out there now on happiness, but this was very early on. And so I went to see a friend of mine who's CEO of quite a big corporation. And we had lunch, and she said, okay, so you're going to do this thing on happiness. What's the secrets of happiness? I started to talk. She glazed over and said, I'm quite a busy person. Can you shorten it down a bit? I said, how long have you got? And she said, about a minute. And I thought, that's an interesting concept. Can you explain happiness in a minute? And now, what else can you explain? And in my head, I rushed forward and thought, there's all this psychology stuff. You can, quick fixes about motivation, about happiness, about parenting, about relationships. There's loads of ideas now flooding into my head, quick things you can explain in a minute or less. And that conversation became the basis for 59 Seconds, which is probably the sort of best known book that I've done.
Well, which is a brilliant notion to me. 59 seconds. I had this idea that one of the last things I was going to say to you, Richard, we've got 59 seconds left to go in our interview. What can you tell? what piece of wisdom do you have for my listeners on Face to Face?
So, the fact is that I could easily have just ignored that comment and gone and written my book on happiness.
Of course.
It's listening to that and going, you know what? That's a better idea than the one I've got. Let me head off in that direction. And originally that book was called 60 Seconds, which isn't such a great title. I was doing a talk and I said, it's things you can learn in less than a minute. And some nerdy person put up their hand and said, it's less than a minute. It should be 59 seconds. And at that point, we were almost going to press with 60. And I phoned up my editor. I said, this is a way better title. We have to stop everything. Stop all the marketing, stop all the advertising, all the Amazon pre-order. We need to call this 59 Seconds. And luckily he went with that because it's a much better title. And that's what I mean. It's that finding the sweet spot of flexibility, I think is so important.
Richard, I'm fascinated. What makes you more, I want to say this in the most inclusive way that I can. What makes you more open to that than, say, another person at that same party who's having that same conversation? Why is it at your age, with the millions of views, your academic background, your CV, etc., you said, "Wow, that's brilliant. I'm now going to explore that"? Because I don't, you talked about this tunnel vision. It's so easy to get caught up in that 200-kilometer rut.
Yeah.
Right? Isn't it? I mean, I'm fascinated
absolutely.
that
I think that's right. And because at some point you can't keep on changing plans. At some point, you've got to go with something. And that's why I call it that
have
switch
to find
off.
a new publisher pretty quickly.
Absolutely. So let's pull the whole thing and do a different book. Although that happened as well. I'd actually changed courses completely on a book when I thought it didn't work. So I what is it? I don't know. I'm dyslexic. Maybe that is a sort of part of it, is that I've got quite a short attention span. I don't actually enjoy reading. That's why I enjoy thinking a great deal. So maybe it's that. Maybe it's magic teaches you to be very flexible.
Right.
If you're doing performing, my goodness, you need to be flexible because you're listening to that audience. I always say that as a speaker, there's two sorts of silence. There's bored silence from an audience and there's fascinated silence.
Right.
And unless you've got a very expert ear, they sound the same and they're terrible things to confuse.
Right.
So, even as a speaker, you've got to be changing tack all the time, depending on what the audience are telling you, even through silence. So maybe it's those experiences. I don't know.
Yeah, I think it's a wonderful lesson for all of us, frankly. I think there's a humility in it to be able to say, well, I think it also speaks to, a lot of my work as a consultant, as my listeners will know, is in international development. And I think one of the things that we get, I think, so wrong about it, we come in with a clipboard instead of just coming in and sitting down and saying, hey, tell me more. Right. This idea of
Yes.
listening, where did we lose that along the way?
Yeah. So I think that's really important. Whenever I go to ideas meetings, I think it's really bad to walk in with an idea. What I try to do is not have ideas, and you either have them as you literally walk through the door. There seems to be something about walking through a door frame, but go in and listen to people, listen to them. And sometimes they'll tell you the key phrase, it will be in the middle of a sentence, and they didn't realize it themselves. And you go, that's the phrase. That's the one that resonates with me. And it's trying to get rid of preconception, I suppose, and just kind of being open to the moment and open to alternative ways of looking. There's that lovely phrase, isn't it? There's nothing so dangerous as a person with just one idea. So, kind of generate 4 or 5 and see where you get to. But don't generate the first one that quickly. Let it percolate.
I love that, and help me out here. But I think you're talking a little bit about a community of ideas too. By the way, I think it's hilarious that you go to ideas meetings. I think that's in itself kind of funny.
Do you not go to ideas meetings?
Hey, yeah, I'm going to check my calendar, Richard, to see when my next ideas meeting is. Yeah.
Oh my goodness, I spent half my life in ideas meetings with people kind of going, "We need a new podcast, we need a new film," and what they do is brilliant because they think they've contributed by saying we need a hit TV show. And you go, yeah, well, I was assuming that. Have you got any ideas? They go, no, that's why you're in the room, Wiseman. So yeah, no, I brainstorm stuff.
That's awesome.
All the time.
Well, I think though the comment, what I took from that was there's this community. You're stepping into through this door frame, and you're not coming in with anything sort of preconceived necessarily. You've certainly got ways forward and opinions, and I was going to say ideas, but ideas about ideas. How's that? But you're open to this group to say, what do you think? Can I hear more, etc. Rooted it in questions. Rooted again. We're back to an appetite for wonder. It seems to me.
Yeah, I think so. I often mess around. I think humor is a great tool because it does open our minds to alternative ways of seeing things. So often good. The first few minutes of any of those meetings, I am messing around. And trying to get people to loosen up. There's a great phrase and then the other thing, ideas meetings, the other thing you want to do in ideas meetings is get the person to, let me go back one tiny step. I don't know if you had connections over in Canada, the James Burke science show. I don't know if it aired over there. It is a superb science show. It's in the 80s, I think. And I spoke to James Burke recently, and I said, why is this such a compelling piece of television? And he said, because in that show, I would take viewers through a complicated argument, but I would always ensure that for the final bit, they got there one beat before me, and it made them feel really bright. So they got there one beat, and they would go, oh, that means, and they'd think of the theory or whatever, then I'd confirm it. And that's what you want in ideas meetings. You want to persuade the other people they thought of the ideas, because it's much easier to sell an idea when it comes out of their mouth, not mine.
Right.
And there's that lovely phrase of, lots of people have good ideas when I'm in the room. And that's kind of what you want. And it takes the ego out of it as well.
Well, I think to some degree earlier on when I was asking you about openness, I think, humility and ego is, I think there's something to be said about that when you're, I guess ideas meetings are whiteboard sessions. They're brainstorming sessions. I mean, I truly have never heard anyone call it an ideas meeting before. And I think it's wonderful. And it makes a great deal of sense to me. And I love this idea of breaking down that fourth wall, those barriers through humor and frankly through relationship, Richard. I think it's brilliant.
Yeah, I know. Often I try to think what I do in them. I mean, often the first part will be me messing around saying that we've got nothing. Like, so if it's an ad or something,
way
you go,
to affirm the group, Richard.
yeah, okay, we got nothing. We've got nothing here. There's nothing here that works. This is absolute. I've never been. This is the worst group I've ever worked with.
Garbage. Yes.
Yes. This is terrible. This isn't going to work at all. And it kind of, as long as it's not true. If it was true, I wouldn't say it. Yeah. But if it's not true, people start to giggle and stuff. And it's that opposite thing. Instead of sort of sitting there being all thrusting and going, oh, let's do all these kind of techniques that people use to generate ideas, none of which I think work particularly well. I just think messing around is quite a good one, actually.
I love that notion. Again, sorry, Richard, it goes to another Monty Python line for me. That's the Philistine pig ignorance I've come to expect from you, non-creative garbage.
Yes.
Do you remember that one?
Yeah, I remember. I grew up with Python and
beautiful.
Spike Milligan as well. Yeah.
I'm getting the sense that I could. I mean, it's only, it's just shy of 8:30 a.m. I've got all day, Richard. Do you? I mean, I'm just having so much fun.
We can run another sort of 15 minutes with no problem at all if you're happy. Yes.
Yeah, you've got an ideas meeting coming up. I understand.
I have. I actually have on the hour. I have. Yes.
So listen, this thing called magic, it gets into your blood, doesn't it? I mean, and I think it's very clear, and I love David's new book, History of Magic. Tell me about one of the characters. I want to ask you about the human index. I've always loved this guy. Can you talk a bit about that? Because David talks about how he was able to purchase this academic gown for the museum, and he put it on, and he was just kind of disappointed that he wasn't able to step inside the method. I think there's something really interesting here about magicians and about wonder and about technique and psychology. Can you talk a bit about that?
Yeah, of course. So, I mean, with any magic effect, you have, the effect, the kind of supernatural magical bit, and then you have the method. And as we both know, often the methods are, nothing more than a piece of thread or
very
a trapdoor or something. Always disappointing. But most methods are known in magic. There's very, very few that aren't, because David's got a colossal library and the magicians write things down. There's a character that comes along just after 1900, which is Arthur Lloyd. He's doing a kind of magic act in the sense that it's unbelievable. He comes on with an academic gown. He says to the audience, call out any type of printed matter, and I'll produce it from inside the gown. I'll take it out from the gown. So they'll shout out birth certificates, marriage certificates, a membership card to this club. No parking.
The notion
inside.
Of it is funny, right?
It's hilarious. A dry cleaning ticket for a pair of trousers. All this stuff, and he would always produce it from the gown. So the method we kind of know, which is that he's got a vast amount of material inside this gown.
It's so ridiculous.
It's ridiculous. It's all in pockets, all over the inside of the gown, as well as his a jacket under the gown and so on. What we don't know is the indexing system. We do not know how he found that stuff so quickly when you're looking at thousands of bits of paper. And so David's very curious about it. His gown comes up for sale. David buys it, and 2 boxes arrive at the museum. One has got the gown inside, and one has got all the pieces of paper, because someone has removed all the paper from the gown. So David phones up the seller and says, what's happened? And the person said, well, I didn't want to send you over a dusty old academic gown, so I had it dry cleaned. So I took all the paper out. In doing so, ruined the indexing system.
Yeah.
In doing so means we will never, ever know. He never wrote it down.
Richard, who knew that the M in magic actually stood for moron in this case?
I think they're just trying to be helpful, and it all went horribly wrong.
Of course, so, it's super kind and generous, and it makes perfect sense. But I just think it's hilarious that
that's what you do.
The secret has been lost for all time.
Forever. There's not many in magic, but that's one of them. So we talk about that in the book, and talk about magician's search for secrecy. The other story I love actually in the book is Houdini. And so I'm in Edinburgh, Scotland, and when he was in Glasgow, not very far away from here, he would always, so when he toured the world, he'd do these escapes where he'd be locked into the local jail, and he would escape. So he's locked into a prison cell in Glasgow, and he can't get out. He can't pick the lock, and he's going on for hours. And eventually, he's in frustration. He leans against the cell door, and it swings open because it's not ever been locked. So he just assumed, like every other escape, someone had locked the door. It was that assumption that was keeping him trapped inside the cell.
If there's not a life lesson there, I don't know,
Yeah,
where you're
exactly.
going to find one.
And what I love about that is most magic works because audience members make assumptions that aren't true. In this instance, one of the world's greatest magicians made an assumption and managed to lock himself in a cell that wasn't actually locked.
It's wonderful, and this is what's so rich, I think, about the history of magic. When people find out I'm a magician now, and I don't know if you share this or not, but I'm in mid 50s, and I still have this deep love for vanishing a coin, and I so many fond memories, and we could share stories, I'm sure. But one of the things I talk about is that I find it becoming more of a historical and an intellectual pursuit for me. And I don't know if you share that similarity. Like, I love to perform still. I love to do a great effect and pull people in. But there's something so rich, and this is what I love about this book. And I hope I get to the museum one day. But there's just something so rich and complex, and the connections to magic and magicians is really quite astounding.
I think that's right. I mean, performing magic is fun. I think I've been in it, like you, a very long time.
Yeah.
You start to think about the past. You start to think about these rather eccentric characters.
Yeah, for sure.
That made their living on the fringes of society. Most of them from modest backgrounds.
Yes.
There's very few that come from wealthy backgrounds, wealthy families. And we talk about that in the book. And you start to think, what is going on here? Why do people, in a world which is filled with astonishing science and technology, I can pick up my mobile phone, I can call the other side of the world.
You can fire missiles from your phone, pretty much.
Absolutely. I need to get that fixed. So I've got all this technology around me, and still, when somebody puts a coin into their hand and opens their hand and it's no longer there, there's just a little part of me that goes, that's astonishing.
Yeah, I just got, no joke, Richard, I just got goosebumps. No kidding. Like, it transported me, and I've been vanishing coins for 50 years. But when I see somebody do it really well, and you go, wow, is it possible? Is that real magic? Did that just happen?
And of course, the problem is most people see bad magic. I mean, most magicians, or a lot of magicians, are terrible, terrible performers, myself included. I mean, I'm not a great magician. And that's one of the funny things working with David Copperfield, who is this sort of legendary performer, is that I got to sort of chat with him about magic and the performance of magic, which was just sort of like a dream come true. So how's
his double lift, by the way?
I didn't ask him that. We were spoken about stage illusions, which yes, but there's that. That most people see bad magic. Good magic, I think, is created collaboratively with the audience.
Nice.
It's created with years ago. So I've got another little story here. Years ago, I was interviewing another extremely well-known magician, very experienced magician, and I had a picture of them performing, I think, when they were 7. And I said, is this your first performance? And they said, oh, no, that wasn't performance. That was me showing off.
Oh, that's really interesting. Yeah.
I said, what's the difference? And they said, well, performers that show off are doing it for their own ego and own enjoyment. And performers that perform are doing it for the good of the audience. And I think for all of us, when we communicate, that's a key message. Are you saying these things for the good of the person opposite you or for your own ego? And whatever you do,
that's good, Richard. Audience over ego. It's so good.
It's because you start to think, well, why am I saying that? Why am I telling that story? Why am I letting them know this, and that? Is this for their own good or just to make myself feel better? And I think that really matters. And magicians need to shift, and the good ones do, to that perspective of giving people these wondrous experiences, which I think they need. I think it lifts us and makes us think that these things which we thought were impossible, might one day be true. And right now, I think the world could do some hope, quite frankly.
Yeah, it's without a doubt. And what I love is and I can't quote it, I'm sure in one of these books, either on these shelves or in another room in the house, T. Nelson Downs talks about in an introduction, I think, to a book where he talks about technology one day making magic kind of not irrelevant. That's not the word he uses, but it'll be set to the side. But I think this book I think David's work, I think your work kind of suggests otherwise. Here we are with, like you say, with these smartphones, and yet we can still be transported. We are still, I don't even know if fascinated is the right word, but I'm going to come back to that phrase of David's appetite for wonder.
I think that's
Most
right.
of us seem to have it, Richard.
Yeah, I think that's right. And a kind of need for mystery.
Yeah, that's good. I love it.
Which is, I think, important as well.
Yeah, it's so good.
And I think magic has a kind of simplicity. The world is very complicated. And we know that with technology, even though it might be simple to use, there's a vast amount of kind of complicated stuff behind it. But good magic looks effortless. It's just magical stuff happening right in front of you. And I think that's a very appealing thought.
I love that we're going to wrap up here in a minute or two. I know you've got your ideas meeting to get to, and I have another coffee I've got to brew, and I've got to finish this book. I loved your phrase early on in the interview that, after reading Carnegie's book, How to Win Friends and Influence People, it was quite handy to be likable as a magician.
It's quite useful. It's quite useful.
Useful. And,
yes.
And you know what? The English accent makes that it fills it with import, by the way. Yeah. So here we go. I'm going to quote from the book, and this is right in the introduction. David Copperfield, thank you for the book. Richard, thank you. David Britland for putting this together. It's just, it is gorgeous. I'm proud to own it at the risk of sounding corny and having a blast going through it. Quote, magic matters. It transports people into a world in which the impossible appears possible. Precious items appear out of nowhere. Objects defy gravity, and people are sawed in half and magically restored. Watching a great magic show opens people's minds and inspires them to achieve the extraordinary in their everyday lives. Close quote. That's right out of David Copperfield's new book, History of Magic, co-written with our special guest today, Richard Wiseman. Richard, what a pleasure. Can I give you 59 seconds to wrap it up for us? I went there, Richard. Sorry.
59 seconds. Well, I don't know what to say. I mean, if I've got 59, what I wouldn't do is be wasting a vast amount of time at the beginning of the 59 seconds explaining that I didn't have very much to say in the remainder of the time. But oh my goodness, I've wasted a few more seconds.
I think we're down to 27 now.
Down to 27 maximally. Well, I'd like to thank you for inviting me on the show, and also just for being you. I mean, I don't know how many people have thanked you for being you, but there should be more of them.
Well, wow, that's really cool and kind and lovely, and I'm pretty sure there wasn't a sarcastic tone to that, but
the thing is, as well as having an English accent, I also have a voice which sounds like everything I say sounds sarcastic. It's a blessing and a curse.
Well, you definitely have a little bit of, I think, an Eric Idle-like or John Cleese-like delivery that I have
It's my entire life. It's like, I go to a wedding and I say, oh, congratulations. And it sounds sarcastic. So it's been very difficult. But what it does mean is that when I say something that does sound sarcastic, it could be genuine or it could be deeply sarcastic. Quite frankly,
well,
there's
isn't
no way
that
knowing.
What you want people to think? Once you've learned how to fake sincerity, Richard,
yes.
You've got everything sorted out.
It adds that little bit of mystery to their lives.
That's right.
And annoys them for a very long period of time. Yeah, just like magic.
What a crazy, wonderful, beautiful, ridiculous pleasure having you on the show, Richard. I can't tell you. I feel like, at the risk of, how's this for not sarcastic? I feel like I'm a better person having connected with you, and I'm looking forward to reading 59 Seconds, folks. You can get Richard's books where good books are sold. Please pick up a copy of David Copperfield's History of Magic. It's stunning and it's easy to get. It's at all the usual digital bookstores, but real ones too. And Richard, it's richardwiseman.com, Richard, where people can find out more about.
Yeah, put Richard Wiseman into Google. Ignore most of the links, but the one that comes eventually on page 20, that's my stuff. Right. So yes.
Page 20. Well, we've been talking with Richard Wiseman here today on Face to Face. What a pleasure, Richard, having you on the show. It's been a real delight.
Thank you very much indeed.
So there you have it, my interview with Richard Wiseman. What a wonderful guy. And I had so much fun in this conversation and getting to know Richard a little bit more, not only about his work, but about him and who he is and what he does. And David Copperfield's History of Magic's the book. check it out online. Check out Richard as well, richardwiseman.com, for more information about the work that he does. And if you're interested in what I'm up to, davidpecklive.com, you can find out more information about my writing and speaking there. And facetofacelive.ca will get you to, we're getting close now, folks, close to 600 interviews online. I can't believe we're coming up on that number, but it's been, oh, wow, I guess it's been about 8 years now. If you like what I'm up to here, please leave a review online. It's so important. Please mediate the heck out of us if you can. Send us to family and friends. Sign up for our newsletter. That goes out about 4 times a year, but a review would be important and would mean a great deal to me. Spotify, iTunes, something along those lines. If you're listening on YouTube, like us there and subscribe, and subscribe to the podcast where you listen. That's always helpful for us as well. But what a pleasure being along for this face-to-face ride for the last, I guess, almost 8 years now. Getting to be able to meet people like Richard is just, it's wonderful. I hope these conversations are enriching your life too, because I know they are for me. Getting to know people and going a little bit deeper, pulling back those layers, and this appetite for wonder, as David P. Copperfield says in this book, is something I think that can, it's a lesson for us to take into all aspects, it seems to me, of our lives. So thanks again for listening to Face to Face, richardwiseman.com, David Copperfield's History of Magic, and we will see you next time.